It's a long video. Hello everyone. I know I promised not to say this anymore, but it's been a while. Yeah, it has been a long time since I've done a video like this. Actually, over a year. But as I've said before, I just like to make videos when I can and when I read and when it feels fun. Hoping that that is more regular, but we'll see. As you can tell by the thumbnail, I haven't done it yet. Spoiler alert. I have in store for you a very large mid-year wrap-up. I have read 27 books in the first 6 months of the year. Wild. That hasn't happened in years. The closest I came was 2 summers ago when I read like 12 books in July. And then I didn't read anything until like December. So here we are. I am excited to talk through everything with you. I've been sailing through some fantasy series, which I'm excited to talk about. There's enough. You can tell how long this video is. I have no idea how long it's going to be. But without further ado, let's get into it. So I have 2 ways of which I've been tracking my reading this year. The first being this 2026 reading tracker by Novel Yours. I have absolutely loved having a physical, actual reading tracker just for this year. I got this for Christmas from my sister, and it is the best thing ever. There is a spot, I haven't filled out everything. It's kind of my first year for it, so I'm just feeling it out. But there's a page right at the beginning to say, like, what's your reading goal? If you could tell, I surpassed that one. Reading habits, etc. Tracking new releases, series you'd like to finish, your wish list, your pre-orders, your reading log. It's in pencil so you can't really see it. They give you space to write 360 books if you are a mad human. Make your own reading challenges, series tracker, habit tracker. I have not done a good job of keeping up with this. I'll be updating this today or tomorrow. Habit book tracker, etc. And then we get into each month. So each month has a calendar and a lovely calendar page. It's all tabbed here at the side too. It's beautiful. There's a spot for January releases, monthly goals, books that you want to read this month. So this is for your actual TBR, and then your wish lists and pre-orders here. And then it gives you spots to fill out all the things. So there's reading stats, so your goal and then your total read. And then again, each month it gives you a spot for like, I want to say 20-ish books, 25 books. Gives you a DNF log, your book haul, and then your like month recap. What were your favorites? Which I have not filled out this other than January. And then what I love about this too is you get to graph everything. It's so cool. Gives you for format, hard, like ratings, number of pages, etc. So you can kind of see how your reading tracks. And then there's like an activity in the back. So there's a word search, or if it's something bigger, it takes up both pages. So there's usually like a word search and then something else over here. Most of the time it's a word jumble. And then you have just extra dot pages for whatever you feel free. And then we go to February. So, this has been so much fun tracking everything with this. And then I've also been using Goodreads. I have attempted to switch to other reading platforms. I really like Bookly. Fable is wonderful. It's just hard because I've had so many years in Goodreads, and I like having my folders and my lists and my want to read list and everything that like I don't have in those other platforms. One of the platforms I tried, you could import your whole list, But then that platform did not work out. So I'm testing with those other two platforms still. But for now, I really do still enjoy Goodreads. So I'm going to continue, and a lot of people that I know still use Goodreads. So I'm staying on Goodreads for now. But yeah, so I'm going to use my Goodreads today to track the order in which I read books this year. So the first book that I read in all of 2026 was the third book in the ACOTAR series, A Court of Wings and Ruin by Sarah J. Maas. I started ACOTAR at the middle of February, or middle of December, sorry, early December. Had a bit of time getting into the first book, and then once I got into the second book, just fell in love and read A Court of Wings and Ruin in less than 24 hours. Mind you, this book is 699 pages. I started it at about 7 o'clock. No, earlier than that. I started it in an evening, like a Monday afternoon, and finished it on Tuesday morning. Yeah. And then immediately jumped into A Frost and Starlight by Sarah J. Maas, the fourth book, oftentimes nicknamed the Christmas episode of the ACOTAR series. Obviously, I cannot talk about these two books plot-wise because they are the third and fourth books in a very large series. I may end up doing a video just on the Sarah J. Maas world. You'll see why in a minute. But I'm loving her writing and her books and all the things. ACOTAR was definitely the way to start. And if you know, I started Throne of Glass years and years and years and years ago. I finally read it. Books are just going to continue to appear there. All right, so the third book that I read this year is not the next book because I needed to slow down because my friend and I were reading it at the same time and she was a little bit behind me, and so I needed to slow down because I am a stupid fast reader. So the third book that I read was Dungeons and Drama by Christy Boyce. This is a kind of fluffy middle grade YA, probably more YA romance book, featuring a D&D game and D&D in general. And if you don't know, I am a very large D&D human. I play D&D almost weekly with a group of friends. And yeah, I thought this book was really fun. It was too much of a slow burn for how I like to read my romance books. It was very much that enemies to lovers kind of arc. It follows this girl, Riley, who loves musicals and wants to be a Broadway director, which is very much in my avenue. And she works this job, and there's this guy that she hates and whatever who comes in and plays D&D, and they fake date for a bit, and then they eventually do start to date. But honestly, I don't remember much of it because I had to skim the last half of it because it just did not grip me in the way that I prefer romance books to grip me. So very fun. I have another book in this series, they're all standalones, called Dragons and Dating, that I will read eventually. But for now, the fourth book that I picked up this year, I started on a little weekend getaway, was A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas. My friend and I, she was like about third, halfway through. I can't remember exactly where she was. And so then I started it on the trip. And I think I want to reread the whole series now knowing more. But this was fun. I enjoyed it. I do love Nesta a lot. I do. I relate to her in a lot of ways. But this book, the writing style changes because we're so used to being in Feyre's head, and then all of a sudden we're in Nesta's, but not really because we're in her and Cassian's, and it just, like, it took a bit, but we both really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it by the end. She's big. My 5th book of this year, I do not have physically. I thought I did, and I can't find it, so I'm gonna just put a picture here. I may have read it digitally or listened to the audiobook exclusively. I don't remember. But it is Pink Glass Houses by Asha Elias. This was a book club book pick for January. It features a very interesting group of humans who are on a PTA board in Florida. And we picked it because we are an elementary school, and this is an elementary school PTA, so we thought that would be a really fun book to read for book club. And it was fun. However, things take a dark turn in this book. That world is very different than Michigan in terms of, and I hope that PTAs aren't actually like that in Florida, but who knows? I certainly don't. But yeah, it was enjoyable. It was an interesting read, and we had lots of good discussions about it, but that is all I will say. The next book I also don't have physically because I borrowed it from a friend, and it is The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. This is a book that features kind of a magical realism-esque thing that this woman comes and stays in a apartment that she thinks she is subletting from a relative, grandmother, I think. And lo and behold, there is a man in her apartment that she thinks she's staying in. And she ends up realizing that this apartment is in a 7-year time jump. And so we sometimes see this man and sometimes we don't. There's some time travel things happening. It's very fun, trying to figure out like the timelines of things and all this stuff. And yeah, and it's a lovely little fun story. So if you are into kind of magical realism, time travel-y books, I would highly recommend it. Even if you're not, honestly, I would highly recommend it. It took me a little bit to figure out what was happening, and then I was like, once I was in it, I was in it. So highly recommend. The next book that I read this year is Blood and Honey by Shelby Moraine. This is the second book in the Serpent and Dove trilogy. This story follows the kind of unplanned relationship between a witch and a witch hunter, and they kind of get caught in the first book in a way that means that they need to get married because of the time frame, and he doesn't know at the time that she's a witch till a little bit into their relationship when he starts to kind of get feelings for her, and lots of things ensue. There's lots of witch stories and covens and things, and the second book took me a bit to get into it, but I did enjoy it. I look forward to reading the third book. I have not read that yet, but I read the first book sometime last year and just now got to this book. And so yes, I can't really talk about the second book of the series because it may spoil things for the first book, but just know it involves witches and covens and witch hunters and people out to get one another, and a bad witch coven and a good witch and all sorts of things. It's very good. The next book that I read was called What You Are Looking For is in the Library by Michiko Ayama. This is a story of basically a librarian. We don't really know that. There's like 7 or 8 different stories that take place technically in the same library, except you don't feel like that's the case. This book was not what I thought it was going to be. I thought we were more going to be in the perspective of this librarian helping people, but we were in the position of the people, and so each story had their own like arcs because they were completely different people. It was good. It was fun. Just not what I was expecting. So then it took me a little bit to get into it. I did end up listening to this entirely, which I think was a good idea because then I could just listen. And they were somewhat different narrators, if I'm remembering correctly. So, it is, because the back doesn't even really give interest into that, like, we're going to be in their perspectives, not the librarian's perspectives. So, just know that going in, it is a translated book, so it counted towards a read harder challenge this year without even trying, because this was our February book club book, I believe. But quite enjoyed it. I think I gave it a 3 or 4 out of 5 stars. Just was not what I was expecting. The next book that I picked up this month, or this year, finally, was Joe and Laurie by Margaret Stoll and Melissa De La Cruz. So this is a Little Women retelling, following the story, but basically ending if Joe and Laurie got together instead of Joe marrying Friedrich, and Laurie marrying Amy. Did I say that right? Joe marrying Friedrich and Laurie marrying Amy. I have had this book on my shelf for a very, very long time. Probably 3 or 4 years at this point. And I finally picked it up this year because I had the opportunity to direct a stage play adaptation of Little Women, which was absolutely amazing. And I just needed to get back in the world a little bit. This book was not what I was anticipating, because I thought we'd get a little bit more of their, like, we'd almost pick up right where, and like they would just be together, which they weren't. But it wasn't bad. Like, I still had fun. I was in the world. I had time with the characters again, and I love them all. But the pacing just surprised me a little bit. But it was so much fun. If you love the world of Little Women, I highly, highly recommend this book, because you just get to be in the world and see a different perspective of how would things have gone differently? How could the story have been different had she not ended up with Friedrich? The next book that I completed this year is Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. Starting the ball rolling with this series. If you don't know, this first book, I will say, follows the story of Selena Sardathian, who is an assassin, and she ends up getting taken out of prison and has to compete in a competition to serve the king as his personal assassin for when he needs that. This started a rabbit hole of me falling into the world. You'll see that in a second. You've seen it in the thumbnail. I'm loving her books. I'm loving this world. I gave this first book 5 out of 5 stars. It was so wonderful. But yeah, I cannot say enough great things about this book. If you enjoy fantasy, I would highly recommend getting into this. This spearheaded all these things because Sarah J. Maas announced her 6th and 7th books in the ACOTAR series, and the friend that I've been reading these books alongside, we heard rumor that you really should read all of Throne of Glass and all of Crescent City before you pick up book 6, because there is a potential for crossover of things, and I don't quite understand what that means. But yeah, so we had to immediately dive into these books. Not that we weren't already planning on it, it just started that ball. Like, we were gonna take a little more time with them. It just started that ball rolling real quick. So, yeah, so read this. I believe this one I finished in March. I think we're up to March or April now in terms of my timeline of when I've finished books. I read no books in February, so there's that. I took a bit of a pause from the Throne of Glass series, and the next book that I finally picked up was The Women by Kristen Hanna. This book, it did not make me cry like most Kristen Hanna books do, but it did just, I wanted to yell at her, not Kristen, what's her name? Frankie. I wanted to yell at her a lot. But basically this book features a woman who serves in the Vietnam War and what that looks like, and how the women were forgotten when they came back from war and were not treated fairly, were not treated kindly, weren't treated as real veterans, even though they were in it like everybody else. And it is a fantastic story about, and gives such light into what that looked like for them. And yet again, Kristen Hanna's books are just gut-wrenching and amazing and just absolutely fantastic. I almost cried. It was a very heartwarming. I felt very close. Like it felt good, but sad, but also it was phenomenal. This book was absolutely phenomenal. And if you love Kristen Hanna, and if you love historical fiction, and Vietnam War is not something really written about, it's World War II is overtaking the populace of historical fiction. I've been saying this for forever. It was really nice to read a book that was not in that, and that was still a good historical fiction novel. Fantastic. And also, I love her. I will be reading all of her books at some point. The next book that I completed this year was Flight of the Hummingbird. I have a whole review up on this book, so I'm not really going to spend much time on it now, but it is a book that I read, and I wanted to include it in this order. The next book that I read was Crown of Midnight by Sarah J. Maas. We get more of Selena, we get more of Chaol and Dorian and their stories, and I love them. I can't talk about it if you haven't read Throne of Glass. Again, I may end up doing a whole video on all of her books, maybe each series individually. I'm not quite sure. I can't talk about it, but it was good. The next book that I read was a book called Catalina by Carla Cornejo Villavicencio. Horrible. This book is a book about she's an immigrant attending Harvard and gets to attend Harvard without a full legal status, because at the time, or at least in this story, Harvard's letting in students to encourage education and all these things. They know that she's not legal. This book was really strange. I really wanted to absolutely love it. The writing style was really interesting and strange, and it, like, the back reads that a miracle child escapes death in Latin America, moves to Queens to be raised by her undocumented grandparents, and becomes one of the chosen to go to Harvard. Just a very strange writing style that I could not get into. Like, the story itself has potential. I just could not get past the writing style. So yeah. It won a lot of awards. It has a national bestseller. It has a lot of things. It just was not for me. The next book that I read is called I'll Be Right Here by Amy Bloom. This was also a book club pick. I believe this was our book club pick for May. Took me a second. This is another one that, again, I really, really wanted to love, and it had great potential, but the writing style was strange. It is both literary fiction and historical fiction. It follows, I can't remember the people's names. It follows a woman named Gonzala. Gonzala, no N, Gonzala. She loses her brother Samir she finds him. They're not biological or biological siblings. They gain friends who are interesting in their own right. They aren't biological siblings. There's a bit of incest. It takes a turn. It takes a turn. We get like perspective switches, kind of. It's pulled in like diary entries almost, because we get like the year and the location. It's strange. It's strange. I liked it by the end. But my, was it weird. Then we get into some more fantasy. The next book that I read was The Assassin's Blade by Sarah J. Maas. I regret reading this where I did. There's lots of debate all over about where do you read this book. Do you read it first? Do you read it third? Do you read it fourth? Where do you read it? We chose to read it third. I regret that. I would say, as a person who likes story, I much rather would have read it first. It would have, there are pieces in this book that would have hit a lot harder had I read it first. So I regret it. It's a heavy debate for a reason, but I enjoyed it by the end, but it was a hard read because it was so out of the left field kind of thing. I guess before I put it on the shelf, I'll talk about like what this structure is. This is the first/third/fourth book in the Throne of Glass series, but it is told with 5 novellas that she actually published separately, but then bound together and published as a physical book after Crown of Midnight came out. So this was the second or third published, which is why I read it there. Even though the stories themselves came out separately and earlier in probably ebook form, I would assume. So it follows 5 different novellas and follows Selena throughout her time prior to going to prison, which is why, if we would have known why she was in prison, it might have made the first book even a little bit more like, meaty. Next, I read Air of Fire by Sarah J. Maas, the fourth book in the Throne of Glass series. This is when we get a lot of different perspectives in this book, and so I took it upon myself to tab each character in a different color so that I would know what ones are Selena pages, etc., etc., etc. There's lots of characters in these books, and this helped me kind of keep track of who and where we were at the time in their perspective. Sometimes the perspective would change mid-chapter, etc. So I tried my best to tab it up. So it also looks kind of pretty now too. But loved this book. Can't talk about the plot. Lots happens. So next I went down a bit of a rabbit hole. Holding up my Kindle, but there will be pictures here. Because I not only read 1 or 2 or 3, but I read all 4 books in the Off-Campus series, the original series. I fell into a rabbit hole of things. Watched Heated Rivalry in December, loved it, took over my life. Off-Campus came out, watched it, loved it, took over my life, read all the books. Plain and simple. Cannot wait for season 2. Woohoo! So excited. But in doing so, I had to read all their books. I loved them all. I love these stories. They were great. The first book covers Garrett and Hannah and their story that we see over the course of the Off-Campus television show of season 1. They are kind of that fake dating, enemies to lovers of sorts kind of thing, falling in love. They're great. Love it. Love them. The second book follows John Logan and his girl Grace. And their book takes place over a longer stretch of time, which is, I believe, why they're moving them to season 3. So they can kind of introduce, and then we'll get them in season 3. but they are kind of follow that trope of like, should they not kind of thing. She's a little younger. They're all in college, so it doesn't really matter, but to them it does. And so yeah, that follows their story. The third book follows Dean and Allie, who follow the kind of best friends, girlfriends, best friend of sorts. And they kind of are like the friends to lovers, because she's just around the hockey guys all the time because of Hannah. And then the fourth book follows Tucker and Sabrina. And Sabrina has history with Dean, which is a big whole thing. They have a big moment in their book that causes big problems. But they are wonderful. Love those books. Gave them all 4 or 5 out of 5 stars. Loved it. After that, I read The Chase by Elle Kennedy, which is the first book in the kind of second subset of series by Elle Kennedy called Briar U. Follows some other different people. I'm completely blanking on who those people feature. I'll put their names here maybe, or just but loved it. It was super fun. It was great. It was wonderful. I flew through those books like candy. Then I read Queen of Shadows, and again, tabbed her up, baby. There's a few more colors in here. I can't show you my tapping system though, because it does have a spoiler in it. But I have, I put them on that page, which is different. I have each color here. I'm not gonna let you read who's what. But every character, I have a key up front so that I remember who goes to where and who goes to what. Loved it. It was great. Wonderful. Finished it a couple days ago. It was wonderful. Then I had another book club pick, which is This Is How It Always Is by Lori Frankel. I enjoyed this book a lot. It sparked a lot of great discussions at our book club. It follows a family who their child from a very young age starts portraying things that seemingly they are transgender, and the parents have no idea what to do about it because this kid is 4 and 5 years old and just wants to wear dresses to school, but he was born a male. And so what does that look like? His family supports him, but kind of not really. There's all sorts of things. It was a great story and offered a lot of really meaningful conversations. I would highly recommend this book to anyone who's interested in that kind of a thing, to kind of just read a different perspective. We learned later, I guess in the author's note, the author herself has a child who is transgender, and so her writing this kind of also that gave another layer of context that she has experience in this, and that's why she chose to write a story about it. But it was lovely. It was a great book club pick for us to talk about. So yeah. Then, surprise, surprise, I read The Risk by Elle Kennedy, which again follows another kind of subset of people from the Briar U series and the entire off-campus world. The hope and dream would be that we get all of these books adapted. I don't think that's gonna happen, but it would be great. This one kind of follows a secret fake dating trope, which was very interesting with the coach's daughter of the Briar team, fake dating, but secretly dating, but not dating a player on the Harvard team, I believe, which is like a big rival with Briar. And so that's a big problem. And so they can't actually date, but they kind of do. But then her dad it's a whole thing. It's a whole thing. Lovely. Finished a couple days ago. Not my favorite of all of the stories that I've read in that universe, but was still a fun read. And I will continue to pick these books up and sprinkle them in where I need. Then I finally finished a book club pick from last year, which is The Woman in Red by Diana Giovinazzo. This story follows a woman, again, not the story that I thought we were getting, but still a good story overall. It was an interesting timeline told. The perspective is interesting because she's almost telling it in third person and first person at the same time. But it follows a woman named Anita, who is forced into marriage with somebody who she does not want to marry, does not love, is a person she doesn't hate, but just does not want a future with like that. And then he ends up leaving, and she finds Jose, who is a man who is a part of the revolution. And so she falls in love with him and becomes a warrior, and they essentially have a common law marriage after a point, even though she's still married. And so it kind of addresses those kind of things, but also being in the middle of a war. And it was a very interesting perspective and a time period that we don't get stories on. And we don't, because it talks about the liberation of pieces of Brazil and Italy and all these things, and they want Italy to be free. And it's just not a time period that we have that much historical fiction novels about, or we do, but they're not as popular. They're not as well advertised as the World War II ones. So I did enjoy this story. It was not a story I would have picked up. I found it at a used bookstore and picked it up and suggested it to our book club, but wasn't able to go to the book club meeting because I also didn't read it. But it was a very interesting story, and I'm really glad I read it. But it was just a different time period that I'm not used to, and so that took me a little bit of time to get into it, but still very much enjoyed the story. The structure was also just a little tricky. And last but not least, I just finished about 20 minutes before starting filming this video, In Her Own League by Liz Tomford. This is a newer release following the kind of forbidden story of the owner and president of a baseball team with one of her coaches that works with her and works under her. And kind of they are an enemies to lovers kind of arc. A will they, won't they shouldn't, but they do, and what kind of the implications of that are. I'm enjoying the sports romances this year, apparently. I needed to dip my toe into another sport other than hockey. But yeah, so it was a fun little read, and I'm glad I picked it up. I was going to pick it up at some point anyway, and it counted for a challenge that I'm not finishing all of them, unfortunately, but a challenge in Goodreads, and I thought, hey, I needed another book to read before the end of the month, and so I figured why not pick up something that would take me not that long. This is a long video, but I read a lot of books. But thank you guys so much for watching. Again, I hope to be uploading a little bit more regularly. I'm going to film a TBR here in a little bit for July, so that'll be up in a few days, and I can't wait to see what the rest of the year holds. I've already almost hit my entire reading goal for the year of 30 at 27 right now. So, and I have book club for the rest of the year and lots of things coming. So, anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in whenever the next video is. Bye.